My name is Jonathan Modi. I'm the Communications Officer here at the Oregon Health Authority. This is a press briefing update on the air toxics issue here in Portland. You'll hear from senior leaders at OHA, DEQ, and we also have others from our partner agencies, Multnomah County Health and others. We have experts from within these agencies on hand to help answer questions and who will give presentations as well. So just a few quick things. This briefing is scheduled for a half hour. We can certainly arrange for one-on-one interviews if you need after we're done here. Each agency director will make a few comments followed by our data experts. Please hold your questions to the end. And if you could please ask one question at a time, we'd appreciate it, just so others get a chance to ask questions. I may need to interrupt you if you try to ask multiple questions in one question. So, with that, we'll get started. So we have Joni Hammond, who's Acting Director of DEQ here, and Lynn Saxton, who is Director of OHA, here to open it up. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Joni Hammond, Acting Director for DEQ. With me is Lynn Saxton, the Director of Oregon Health Authority. Portland residents and businesses have been anxiously waiting for today's soil testing results from North Portland, the area surrounding Ouroboros, and air monitoring results in the area surrounding Bullseye Glass. Today we're happy to be able to share with you some good news. Before Lynn Saxton and I turn this over to our experts to answer your questions, I want the public to know that while we're focused on these two Portland areas today, DEQ and OHA are committed to working with Oregonians to address air toxics from industrial sources across the state. Thank you for being here and helping us inform the public, not only about the soil and air sample results, but also about air toxics and their health effects. We're looking forward to working with the public to overhaul our rules with a new health-based approach. We'll post all of our information today on saferair.oregon.gov. With that, I'll hand it over to Lynn.
Thank you, Joni. Good morning. I'm Lynn Saxton, Director of the Oregon Health Authority. Thank you for joining us here again today. As Joni said, we're here to share more findings about heavy metals in the air and soil around glass manufacturing plants in Southeast and North Portland. Also, we'll provide a brief update on lab results for cadmium. What do we know? The information we share today will be technical, but it boils down to this. People who live in North and Southeast Portland face minimal short-term risks from chromium-6, cadmium, and arsenic in the air. Soil near Ouroboros Glass in North Portland contains low levels of heavy metals and does not pose any acute health risk to people, and that's good news, but it doesn't mean this problem is solved. We'll continue to do air monitoring for an extended period of time to make sure risks remain low and continue our communication efforts with the media and, of course, with the people in the community. This matters because it's another important step in understanding the impact heavy metals released by glass companies have on the surrounding neighborhoods. Let me back up and tell you why we need to collect and analyze these samples. Last month, our agencies released air sampling data from hotspots in North and Southeast Portland that showed airborne concentrations of arsenic and cadmium significantly higher than state benchmarks. These data were recorded as a follow-up to the Forest Service Moss study. In response, DEQ secured voluntary understandings from Bullseye and Ouroboros to stop using these metals, as well as chromium, which can be highly toxic when it takes the form of chromium-6. DEQ set up air monitors around the glass companies and completed soil sampling in North Portland. OHA health experts analyzed the data to see if metals in the air remained above benchmarks after the companies agreed to stop using them. As you'll see, the levels of metals detected has dropped significantly since October. Current readings do not represent a threat to the community. We will continue to test and analyze environmental data. While the data you will hear about today is reassuring, our work is not done. We will continue to gather and report data going forward. As at least one glass company returns to production, agreeing not to use these metals without emission controls, we'll be able to see if metals spike to higher or even potentially concerning levels. We'll report this information every week. The community can view it on our website at saferair.oregon.gov. Once we have enough data, we'll be able to tell if neighbors should be concerned about any potential long-term effects. We'll put together a comprehensive report and share that with you. Now let me turn it over to our experts who can tell you about the studies we've conducted and what we've found.
My name is Brian Bowling. I'm the Laboratory Program Manager for the Department of Environmental Quality. My role is to oversee the monitoring and analytical resources of the department. I'm here to provide information on the current and ongoing air monitoring that is occurring around Bullseye and Ouroboros. In February, DEQ's laboratory started to mobilize resources to provide monitoring for heavy metals. In consultation with OHA, monitoring was initially set up at the daycare located south of Bullseye. 3 additional sites were located around Bullseye. 1 site was set up around Ouroboros. The initial plan included sampling for 12-hour time period between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. to capture the time of exposure for children at the daycare. The monitoring included the following metals: arsenic, beryllium, cadmium, total chrome, hexavalent chrome, cobalt, lead, manganese, nickel, and selenium. All monitors ran for a 12-hour period until March 1st, when, with consultation with OHA, the sampling period was changed over to a 24-hour period. Moving to a 24-hour sampling period will provide information for long-term health impacts. Most of our concentrations comparisons are in a 24-hour time frame. The results today are for the 12-hour data from the time when the sites were started through the end of February. On the slide, the site at the daycare started February 9th. We started the Portland PAL site February 13th, HAG February 16th, and Winter Haven February 17th. And the single site at Tudman by Ouroboros on February 20th. These results were during the time when both Ouroboros and Bullseye had voluntarily stopped the use of heavy metals. The concentrations that we have observed around Bullseye during this time is significantly lower than those observed in the October sampling. We do not have October sampling data around Ouroboros. David will now discuss the health implications of the data.
Thank you. So I'm David Farrer, public health toxicologist with the Oregon Health Authority. The air data that we've been able to analyze from February is very reassuring, and you can see on the slide some numbers for comparison that we've created. With DEQ's help, we found urban background concentrations from cities around the country as a way to compare the measured concentrations here against what's commonly reported for urban settings around the country. That's the purple line that you see there. Now, for short-term collections of air data, the ambient benchmark concentrations that we've talked about in the past are not the most appropriate for comparison. So we didn't have any 24-hour screening levels in Oregon prior to this. So toxicologists, including me, and toxicologists from Department of Environmental Quality searched other states and other municipalities for 24-hour screening levels that were health risk based. And we selected from among a list of those to find the 24-hour screening levels that you see in orange on the slide. So so the important thing to note is that for arsenic, for none of the metals were found at concentrations above a 24-hour screening level. There are a few days where you can see some exceedances from urban background concentrations. So we find these data very reassuring. So the first slide you see there is arsenic. We also have slides for cadmium and for chromium-6 available. And in addition to these graphics, the full data set is also available, or will shortly be available online today. So what this means overall is that the air concentrations that are measured do not indicate any kind of urgent or immediate health risk to people in the areas surrounding Bullseye or Ouroboros glass.
We'll now bring up Keith Johnson, who will talk about the soil sampling.
Thank you, David and Brian. My name is Keith Johnson, and I am a manager in DEQ's Northwest Region offices. I'd like to provide you with information results related to DEQ's soil sampling efforts in mid-February around the Ouroboros glass facility, which is pictured on the monitor now. The goal of the soil sampling was to determine if historic and ongoing emissions have impacted soils in the area around the facility. And because soil can act as an accumulator of sorts over time, and given the length of operation of the facility, soil impacts should be somewhat conclusive as to whether impacts from these emissions are occurring or not. The sampling was designed to focus on areas of public access or people at higher risk, such as at the daycare facility, including children. And given the industrial nature of the area, I do want to highlight there was limited locations where soil was available to sample around the facility, as you can see on the map. On February 19th and 23rd, we sampled 3 areas around the facility. The Lillis Albina Park, which is just due north of the Tubman School, took 12 samples there. The Albina Community Garden, which is north of that park, 11 samples, and then at Grandma's Place Daycare, 6 samples, as you can see on the map. Samples were taken at the surface or slightly underneath the grass or sod that might have been available. In Lillis Albina Park, we also took some samples within the mulch of the children's play area. All samples were tested for a variety of metals associated with stained glass manufacturing at the Ouroboros facility. Note that most metals, such as cadmium and arsenic, do occur naturally in the earth, and we factor that into our results. To interpret the results, DEQ calculated averages for each contaminant over the 3 areas tested. And for the majority of metals tested, average concentrations of samples collected from these properties were at or below the respective regional background concentrations and or health-based screening levels, which David will explain more here shortly. Cadmium was either not detected or estimated below background at all samples from the community garden and the park. And cadmium was detected in 1 sample at Grandma's Place Daycare. However, the average level of cadmium found in all samples collected was below both sets of screening levels that we've used for comparative purposes. For hexchrome, results were variable, but most results estimated at or below the limit of detection. And chrome-6 was not detected above the laboratory limit at the daycare center, which is good news. Chrome-6 detected in 2 samples at the park and at 1 sample at the community garden did exceed a screening level, but the DEQ screening level, but were below the national guidelines that OHA has used. So based on these results, DEQ concludes that ongoing emissions from the Ouroboros facility are not resulting in harmful impacts to soils around the facility. To address continued concerns, however, regarding soil quality, I do want to mention that DEQ will continue to review sampling results from homeowner soils via a link at our shared website that's posted in front of us or in back of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. At OHA, we received the soil results, and we did a similar analysis to what we showed last time. And again, we have graphics to show the measured concentrations in soil compared to background, to Oregon's guideline values, and to CDC's guideline values. And you can see, as Keith said, for the most part, metals were found below regional background levels. They were in a range similar to what you'd expect really anywhere in Portland. They were also, for the most part, below health risk-based screening levels, with the exception of arsenic, because Oregon's guideline is set so low, even below regional background. So there were exceedances of arsenic, and also for Chrome-6 in some locations. So because of those exceedances over the Oregon guideline values, we did do a more in-depth analysis, calculating doses and risk for children at the daycare center, and also for gardeners at the community garden. And in both of those sort of exposure scenarios, we found that the concentrations of metals were too low to harm the health of people using those, coming into contact with that soil. So again, we think that that's very good news. And I would like to just, this is an opportunity to talk about the shift in focus in the investigation that's been going on. So to this point, we've been really focused to try to understand whether there are any urgent or immediate health risks to children or to people in these areas. And the data that we have so far indicates pretty clearly that there is not an urgent or immediate health risk. So the focus is now shifting from this kind of urgent or immediate risk to long-term health risk. And that means that because there's no urgent or immediate risk, that means we have the time to do this in a thoughtful, comprehensive and scientifically rigorous manner. And so two ways that you'll see that shift in focus happening is first of all that will be, as Brian Bowling said, the air monitoring data is switching from 12-hour to 24-hour monitoring, again shifting focus to long-term assessment. And those data will be uploaded every week on Thursdays to the website, so that'll be available for people to see as they come in. And the other way that you'll see a difference is that we're planning to do 2 complete public health assessments that are comprehensive of all the data that's been collected so far and any additional data that's going to be collected from the environment. And those reports are our goal and our intention is to have those released for public comment in the fall of this year. So moving forward, our focus is very much on taking the necessary time to carefully and comprehensively consider the long-term health risks related to these sites. And then in addition to these 2 sites, we're also working with Multnomah County and DEQ to establish a fair and transparent set of criteria for prioritizing investigations at other areas where the MOS has indicated metal concentrations. And so as soon as that criteria and that prioritization is finished, we'll also make that publicly available. So that is all I have.
I think I was going to mention you already.
Oh, yes.
So thank you. I'm Katrina Hedberg, and I'm the State Health Officer with the Oregon Health Authority. And I was just going to provide a little bit of updated information on our laboratory urine testing results that we've gotten. We've continued to collect those. And we currently have 316 Oregonians who have been tested for urine cadmium, and that's statewide. Because when we make something reportable by laboratories, we don't just select a certain area, so statewide. But of those, 90% have been in Multnomah County, so the bulk of them have been occurring as a result of the current event. Of the 281 that we've had in Multnomah County, 10 of those had detectable cadmium in the urine. 2 were in children under the age of 18 and 8 were in adults. And I will mention that one of these individuals has been retested and the result is now negative. So that's something around laboratory testing as well, that there are some potential false positives. And so when we have folks that have an elevated result, we want to make sure that they get linked back to their provider for further evaluation. Of those 10, there are 4 that have had levels that were elevated enough that we would recommend that they had more follow-up, and we have continued, along with Multnomah County, to provide that follow-up information both to patients and the clinicians and connecting them with appropriate resources. The other piece I wanted to mention is that we have now finalized the evaluation of the cancer rates in the North Portland area, and as I had mentioned last week, there have been no elevated levels of either lung cancer or bladder cancer noted in the North Portland area, but the final report, the larger report and all those methodology are now on the website. So with that, I think we're able to answer questions.
The news release here says that hexavalent chromium, also known as chromium-6, was later found, presumably in the October air monitoring data. What do you guys have on that?
So my understanding is that the October monitoring for air was only measured for total chromium. So that data is not broken out into chromium versus chrome-6. That may be referring to the discovery later on that the facilities were using hexavalent chromium in some of their processes, but that does not relate directly to the October air monitoring.
So do you all have any evidence that there has been chromium-6 detected in the air around these facilities? Because this is what the news release that you guys wrote seems to say.
So, yes, hexavalent chromium was found around, but it's below any acute health.
Is it above the state's ambient benchmark concentration?
It is above the ambient benchmark concentration. It's not below. It's not above the 24-hour screening level. So again, indicating not an urgent or immediate health risk, but that is going to be part of our consideration in the long-term risk evaluation that we're starting.
So where and when was that found?
The first monitoring was found February 9th at the daycare center, where we started to actually analyze for hexavalent chromium. So our first sampling was started February 9th at that location.
The arsenic results looked kind of worrisome to me, because although you say they're safe, the little orange line was way down here and the spikes were all up here. Why is it set so low, and if that's really true that it's not a problem, it looks like a problem to me in the graph.
You're speaking of arsenic?
Arsenic levels.
Yes. So in the case of arsenic, the risk-based screening levels, the Oregon guidelines they're set on some very conservative assumptions. One of those that makes a really big difference actually is that 100% of the arsenic in soil is absorbed into the body, and that's a very conservative assumption. A lot of literature suggests that native soil arsenic level is only as low as 10% is actually absorbed into the body. So that's part of the reason why we're always careful to say that when there's an exceedance of a screening level found, that does not automatically mean that there's public health risk or that there's a level of concern. That's why, but it does mean that we need to do additional analysis, which is what we did, and found that the risk was low.
I guess a lot of people might have thought that the air in Portland is being monitored on a regular basis anyway, and something up there just testing the air to make sure it's fine. But it seems like you guys have scrambled around to now check it and now put a system in place. Anybody want to comment on the fact that maybe we're sleeping at the switch there for a while?
So our air monitoring program that we have in the state, we have a number of sites throughout the state. Our what's considered air toxics monitoring that the state has funding for. We have 2 federally funded sites that are part of what's called the National Air Toxics Network that provides sites data nationally, and we're able to use those for long-term trending across the nation. And additionally, we have 2 air toxic sites that we rotate around the state a year at a time. These are full, what we'd call full suite air toxic sites. So they look at volatile compounds, they look at polyaromatic hydrocarbons, they look at metals, and those, because of the way the benchmarks are set up, these are annual averages. So we deploy these for a year at a time, collect data to understand what that impact is over a chronic aspect of comparing to the benchmarks. So those are our two full suite sites. We have siting criteria that we use in order to where to place those monitors, but they are just 2 monitors that we can rotate around annually. The 2 monitors that are federally funded stay in place. Those are very specific to meet the national standards, and that is what we have for DEQ resources in air toxics monitoring.
Where are those 4 sites?
Currently, the 2 general-funded sites had originally are currently in status of redeployment. Swan Island was the last air toxic site. That was the one of those sites. The last site was scheduled to go out into Gresham. We're currently siting that site. And then we have a site in La Grande and a site in North Portland that is being moved because of siting conditions, but will be staying within Portland.
So what I understand from some of the maps that we've seen, there was not a monitoring system that could have caught this.
We're looking at very regional or a very small scale, and our monitors are not in that, we don't do the monitoring in that fashion. That requires a lot of monitors to be deployed. Currently, our monitoring scheme around here at Bureau Burroughs and at Southeast Portland has been every 6 to 7 days a week. We have staff that are going out there every day to collect a sample and bring it back to the laboratory, and it's there's a lot of work to run these deployments. Our normal sampling schedules are either like a 1 in 3 or a 1 in 6 for these air trends, because we look at this from an annual perspective, not what would be considered more of a fence line monitoring perspective, which is what the MOS has allowed us to do, is really to focus into a smaller area. And we need to better understand what the MOS information is telling us so that we can look at how we do our monitoring into the future and other opportunities to improve monitoring into the future.
Could you need more monitors?
More monitoring helps to inform. There's also other mechanisms that we can use to inform information. And that's things like MOS, emissions inventories, modeling. There's many things that can be brought together to inform the situation.
Could you guys explain why you guys have benchmarks for air concentrations and soil concentrations? If, when you then find exceedances, you're going to compare them to different levels. You have the exceedances in the soil at the daycare we talked about last time. You have levels above the benchmarks this time. And what it seems like is that you're sort of picking numbers out of thin air to shift the goalposts to downplay the public health concerns that might be associated with that.
Well, the benchmarks are set so that if we find concentrations that are below that number, then we're very confident that there's not health risks associated with that soil. But they are set very conservatively. So when there is an exceedance, it does trigger an investigation. That does trigger more analysis, which is what we do. And it is true. Oftentimes we find that in that in-depth analysis, the risk is low. But I wouldn't say that the benchmark concentrations are pulled out of thin air. I mean, they're set conservatively and carefully to be protective of the most vulnerable.
Not the benchmarks, these 24-hour values that you all just in the last couple of weeks have plucked out of, I mean, this came from nowhere. We've been talking about the relation in the air to the ABCs, and now we're talking about 24-hour value, so that it appears like that you all can downplay the levels that have been found in the air and compare them to something different than we've been discussing the entire time that this issue has been in the public sphere for the last month.
Right. So the October monitoring data that we had was a 30-day average. So it's a little bit longer term monitoring. So in that case, it is appropriate to compare against the ambient benchmark concentrations because there's a little bit longer time. Also, you'll know that so available online is also a document, a table that includes the ambient benchmark concentration. So they are listed along with the 24-hour screening levels, and again they're used as a trigger to know where and when to look at more closely at air quality. The data that we have so far from February is 12-hour collections. They're more short-term collections, and because of that, it's not really appropriate to compare those against an annual a benchmark that's intended for use with an annual average. So the 24-hour screening levels are set to be protective to be compared against a 24-hour sample collection. They were derived by toxicologists in other states. The states we were selected from were New Hampshire, actually Canada, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, and also New Hampshire. The fourth one, I'm blanking on what the fourth state was, but it is available online and it's in the table. So I wouldn't say also that those are pulled out of thin air. I mean, those are commonly used in other states for comparison against 24-hour screening levels.
Is there any thought that the paint manufacturers might be singled out? Because I've passed, metal casting companies and car painting shops that I've smelled stuff and wondered about it. And the moss may collect heavy metals, but it might not be drinking in the volatile organic compounds or whatever else is coming out. So you've jumped on the glass manufacturers, but is there any concern that perhaps other manufacturers are in a similar situation for other things that you're not testing for?
I guess I might say
Do
that.
you want to do it on
Yep.
tape?
Yeah.
While he's coming up, Texas is the other state.
I would say that, yeah, DEQ is definitely concerned. I mean, that's part of our rulemaking is to look at all these potential sources. Many of those types of sources are under existing permits for those types of operations. So I understand that there's some question about some of those permits, and that's how we'll look at it in a more health-based rulemaking process.
With the two glass companies now, are there any restrictions on them? Have they been lifted? What's the scenario there?
Yeah, Johnny.
I think, as most of you know, we signed an agreement with Ouroboros, and they've agreed not to use cadmium, arsenic, or chromium and in their operations until they have pollution control equipment in place. We continue to work on agreement with Bullseye, and we expect them to continue not using cadmium, chromium, and arsenic until that agreement is signed.
Do you have a timeline for either?
We continue to work with them on that agreement.
And if they don't come to an agreement, then what happens?
One of the reasons that we put forth our temporary rules to our Environmental Quality Commission is to provide that stopgap so that what we don't have federal or state authority to, this would provide that authority through the temporary rule. And so glass manufacturers of this type of glass would have to follow what the rule says and not use those compounds unless they have pollution equipment installed.
But right now, there's nothing stopping them, say, if they wanted to just start right back up today, right?
That's correct.
Isn't that a problem?
We expect them to continue, and we're in ongoing conversations with them.
And how are those conversations going?
They're going, we continue to talk with them.
I have trouble just with the fact that they just can't stop. Why? What's the conversation? What's the pushback? Why not just get those filtration systems? Or
And-
stop using cadmium
And they have stopped using, they're not
rare.
using them. And our expectation is they'll install pollution equipment prior to using those metals.
Is that expensive? Is it costly to them?
You'd have to ask them. I mean, expense is relative, but it does cost money, yes, to put in pollution equipment.
Are you familiar with those devices?
I am not a technical expert. There are people maybe here, okay, about what might install, if you'd like to hear a little bit more.
Just,
You want us I don't consider myself an expert on this, but there's a couple of different control technologies that they could use, both together or in tandem. One are just bag houses, which capture particulates, and they're fairly standard across many different types of industries. And then what we call electrostatic precipitators, which are, well, sort of what they sound like, will capture particulates as well. My understanding of that process is it's not a real simple thing to just sort of put on a stack. It takes weeks, potentially months, to design and manufacture. They're not just sitting on a shelf in a warehouse, and they have to be calibrated to work with the facility's manufacturing process so that they can maintain oven temperatures and things like that. So I also understand it is fairly expensive, but that's just a
Can you
reality.
elaborate a little bit more? What's fairly expensive, like hundreds of thousands,
My guess is it's easily tens of thousands of dollars, but I'm not an expert on the process.
So it could put them out of business
Yeah.
then?
I can't really comment on that.
So,
it is
I mean,
expensive.
since there's
One more
no-
question.
Since there's no real guidelines for them not to use these, if they determine as a business it's just too cost heavy, what's to stop them from just not implementing these filtration systems?
Well, it would either be an agreement they would sign with us, the presence of these temporary
haven't
rules. Yeah, or the presence of these temporary rules, which are being considered right now.
But if they look back at their balance sheet, I guess is what I'm saying, and determine these filtration systems are too expensive and there's no agreement with the DEQ, and they kind of have that decision to make whether what's more important, business or the health of Northeast Portlanders, what happens then? If it's too expensive for them to put in these filtration systems and there's no rules in place right now, no agreement with DEQ, what is to stop Bullseye from just going right back to business as usual?
That's I guess I'd focus on the word business in that, and that's a business decision for them to make. And we would obviously, as the agencies here, have to take a long look at
But
that.
isn't that the problem? That's what happened here. That's what we're talking about. What do you mean look at it? I mean, aren't you looking at it now?
We are. We're in negotiations with them. They've made agreements to suspend use of those, and we've been working on rulemaking to give us the authority to deal with that.
Okay,
How's
thanks
that
everyone.
coming along?
Thanks. Can we do a one-on-one afterward? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.